Erev Tov, and welcome as we continue our journey of this time of the Omer, as we travel the 49 days from Pesach to Shavuot, from those first grains to those first fruits, from our liberation from the narrow place to the revelation and the expanse of the wilderness. But before we get there, we need to be here. So let's take some breaths. Take our place and our space in this present moment, grounding ourselves to the here and now as we prepare to count the next day of the Omer. And so we bless. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign spirit of the universe, who brings us holiness with the mitzvot and connects to us with the counting of the Omer. Hayom, Shnei Masar Yom, Shehem Shavuot Echad, V'chamisha Yamim Ba'omer. Today is 12 days, which is 1 week and 5 days of the Omer. Chod Shebegevurah, a day of humility in a week of strength. So today, this day of humility and strength, in this week of strength, in this week when we've been talking about time, we stop to commemorate a different time, a dark time. For tonight starts Yom Hashoah, a day of remembrance of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, of those we were lost, the lives that were lost, the culture that was lost, the learning that was lost, the world that was lost, the worlds that were lost. So much changed. For our people, for the Jews, I used to call it's kind of our Torah. And so on these days, I started last night, so on this day of Yom Hashoah, as last night, I honored my friend, Miriam Mitzi Wilner, who made it through living as someone she wasn't, with her faith intact and her identity intact, and came here to live fully and share so much of that with us. And I was honored to be able to share so much with her. And today, I honor another amazing woman of valor in my life, another survivor, Goldie Goldstein. Goldie was a student at Lithuania when the Nazi came to power. I do know that, but unlike Mitzi, whose one of her things in life was to share that story, Goldie was more reticent. Didn't speak much of that time. She spoke with a thick accent, and we knew that that was part of her story. But she didn't really say much. I got bits and pieces. I know she was in a labor camp because when she had asked me whether I had seen the movie The Pianist, she just looked at me and said, "That's what it was like." I knew she met her husband as they were still in Europe being liberated from the camp. When she was walking along a road and all of a sudden she heard her name being called, "Goldie, Goldie." And it was her teacher. And he became her husband. But Goldie's raison d'etre was teaching, was sharing her knowledge of Judaism and most of all of Hebrew. She loved the Hebrew language. She loved the grammar. She loved the intricacies. She taught it. It just gave her so much joy. And she taught almost up to the time of her death. And she came to shul every Saturday. Another part of my posse of Rhoda Goldman to Beth Shalom. And Goldie she was there every week. She loved to sing. She loved to pray. She loved Torah. She loved to study. And she loved to teach. But about herself, she didn't really talk very much. And then there was that day, Yom Hashoah, 2005. And Goldie and I went to a funeral that day, a funeral of another survivor, my friend Beverly Pinto's mother, Erna Pinto. Erna, her late husband Eric, and Goldie were all survivors who actually stayed just like Mitzi, stayed tied to their Jewish faith. It was not something to be taken for granted. These people, they experienced the darkness, some of the darkest things that mankind could throw at them. They had to have questioned God and questioned faith, and yet they came out with their faith intact, or ties to it, or connections to it. I understand not everyone did, but these people did. And they passed it on to their children and to their students, and to make sure people all over heard them. On that Yom HaShoah, at lunch after the funeral, Goldie actually mentioned feelings about her faith in God. Words I'd never heard her speak. Did she believe in God? Did she think Jewish practice brought her closer to God? Or what does God mean? Or God closer to you? It's complicated. She knew deep inside that adherence to Jewish practice, to keeping these rituals and these traditions alive, is what will keep Judaism vibrant for years to come. And that was important to her. That was the depth of her soul. And the teacher in her and the scholar in her wanted all Jews to know Hebrew, to read the literature, the poetry, the teachings that Judaism had to give, both secular and sacred. But God's role in all of that? Goldie pointed to the fork on the table. So, Marilyn. So God really will see and care whether the fork that I used was milchik, dairy, or fleshik, meat. God will care about that, but couldn't see what was happening with the Nazis. She shrugged. And we went on to other things. But Goldie had this deep tie to her practice and what it meant. And that was our tie together. She really, we shared that love of being there and sharing the learning as well as the liturgy. Belief in God, what it really, where does that work? Omnipotent, where does that place us? It's complicated. Some may believe and some may not. In the camps, there's the story that's told of the group of concentration camp inmates who held God on trial. Does God exist? How could a God exist if this is happening to God's people? Is it real? Is it apocryphal? It could have happened. And God was held on trial. And what was the outcome? The outcome was no. How could God exist? But the punchline to the story, when it was all over, and now it's time to daven mincha. So as we go on this journey of the Omer, and we dip into this ritual and this tradition, and we look for its meanings, remember that those ties come in many places. It may come from a belief and faith in God, a transcendent spirit. And it may come in the little rituals that we do and the traditions that we follow that feed our soul and our culture and our lives, both secular and sacred. Because it teaches us to carve out some space of holy time, however you define your holiness. And if we can remember that, those lives, well, I won't say will but be in vain. They were never in vain. But we will honor all those people as well as ourselves. Laila Tov, and I'll see you tomorrow.